Imagine being minutes away from millions of cash, surrounded by armed guys and chased by police sirens through Rio de Janeiro. A gang planned the theft of the century in Brazil's turmoil, where poverty and crime overlap. They didn't realize that this procedure would become a brutal race against time where every move may be fatal. Legends are often simply stories in Brazilian organized crime. Imagine a bank robbery that defied all expectations and redefined chutzpah. This gang planned a unique operation, not only to take money. Get ready to discover the secret strands that lead them to an unimaginable end. A group of 34 burglars stormed into the Brazilian central bank basement. The criminals stole $8 million. This was Brazil's biggest bank heist. Interestingly, the central bank's basement has security cameras, temperature sensors, and strict security. How did the robbers enter, steal, and go without a trace? The police investigated this case for years. Imagine that the cops learned that the millions they took cursed the gang, making most of them wish they had never become involved. How did this happen, and how did the police inquiry show officer corruption? One of the weirdest stories ever. It'll feel like a cop movie, not real life. Prepare for crazy storylines. Mysterious Novelist. Well, welcome. I am the Mysterious Novelist. On Monday, August 8, 2005, the Brazilian Federal Police received a tip that the Fortaleza Central Bank had been looted. The central bank's report astonished the authorities because it was well protected and had never been attacked. The bank's staff informed the authorities that the crime had happened in the basement. Since it was Monday, it was after the weekend. Following their break, the staff unlocked the bank and headed to the money vault in the basement. They were surprised by a gaping hole. Clearly, this opening led to a tunnel. Upon inspecting the tight opening, most of the cops concluded they could not get through. The cops initially asked employees, how much did the robbers steal? It was too late to compute, according to staff. A detailed computation showed it was above 100 million reals. After a comprehensive computation, they found 164 million Brazilian reals. In dollars, it's roughly 80 million. Of course, inflation and the exchange rate made that amount insane. They may weigh 3.5 tons, 3 conventional cars of this money. Imagine money weighing 3 automobiles. It's big. Consider the weight and amount of cash. You have a mountain. The burglars were smart. They didn't steal the newly minted money because the serial numbers were ordered and simple to track. They utilized old money, so the serial numbers were mixed up and unstructured, making it hard to trace. However, the police were bewildered and unable to access the little opening. He stated he would go in since one was too thin. No, man, going down alone is risky, his co-worker said. Traps, grenades, or armed thieves may be inside. Ananias Spira, a tiny policeman, was brave and entered anyhow. Though he was afraid, his adrenaline pushed him in. Ananias crawled inside the tunnel. The tunnel, dark and mysterious, stretched out before them. It was their only path forward, their only hope of reaching their target undetected. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they had no choice. Every step they took echoed in the confined space, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked around every corner. The older ones had screwed up serial numbers, making them hard or impossible to track. However, the police were bewildered and unable to access the little opening. One slim man indicated he would go in. His co-worker said, "Down there is dangerous. Traps, grenades, or armed bound thieves may be inside." Anis Spira, a tiny policeman, was brave and entered anyhow. Though afraid, Anis' adrenaline gave him the push he needed to enter the tunnel and crawl. Lighting was on, and the tunnel contained ventilation pipes, fans, and hardwood flooring. He suspected the robbers were still there, possibly near the tunnel's end and armed, since the lights were on. He began to worry that he had put himself in danger, because there was a thin, invisible thread. If Ananias walked on it and pulled it, it may trigger a bomb or a trap planted by the burglars. Even though the tunnel was only 70 meters long, imagine him crawling it for an hour. He moved slowly out of fear. A ladder led up from the tunnel's end for Ananias. Anas waited on the steps with his revolver, ready for anything. Criminals may be waiting with firearms at the other end. He removed the tunnel entrance cover and searched for thieves. However, the house was quiet and vacant. Everything in the home was covered in white flour-like powder. This powder conceals fingerprints. Garbage, clothes, and tools littered the house. All windows had wooden boards. Anas found no one in the residence after searching. Here and the money was gone. The burglars took sand from the tunnel and filled a room with sandbags. From the house's roof, Anas saw that it was roughly 70 meters from the bank. His colleagues were advised of his location by phone. At the time of the theft, this house at the tunnel entrance was painted green and was the facade of an artificial grass firm. The huge robbery began at this house. As expected, the news went viral on all networks and newspapers, even foreign press. Imagine journalists gathered at the house from the start. Since cops found it, they were there from the start. These are photographs of the house's whole and the tunnel from within. It was well done and clearly labored over. However, the house was run down and full with clothes and trash. Naturally, the police investigated the crime site, house, and bank vault to determine how the robbers did it. Investigators found similarities between this operation and a previous one in São Paulo, a city known for robberies and gangs. They instantly saw the connection. It is certain that robbers from prior operation participated in this one. The burglars hired this home, painted it green, and registered it as an artificial grass firm. Sand and dirt from the house would fit under this cover. For the tunnel, they cut a section of the floor and covered it with carpet. If a stranger approached or a specific event occurred, they would quickly seal the aperture, concealing the tunnel they built. They used shovels, picks, and spades to dig a 73-meter-long hole quietly. The excavated sand was bagged and transported outdoors. They bagged it and carried it outside. The tunnel was supported by wood planks and steel plates. Approximately 900 wooden boards were used. They added ventilation pipes, fans, and lighting throughout the tunnel. Any tunnel has these features, but this one includes a water and phone connection. Of course, this was the first tunnel to include a water line for drinking and working. People inside the tunnel and outside the house used the phone connection to coordinate their efforts. One of the detained thieves claimed they were working 24/7 in 7-person shifts. Initially, the main issue was dust. Every day, a vehicle arrived to collect the dust, but when they began to create dust, the neighbors took notice. In a small community, a truck loading several bags of dust every day sparked suspicion. The burglars initially believed that this strategy would cause problems, so they began keeping the dust bags inside the house. To avoid suspicion, bricks were used to seal chambers that were filled from floor to ceiling. If a visitor entered the house, they would fill many rooms with dust bags. They then poured dust into the house's backyard to level the ground. They reported that their dust raised the garden floor by nearly a meter. The subterranean tunnel was nearly straight, except for a brief turn to avoid a sewage pipe. The tube then traveled beneath the bank. The chamber would be bricked up to avoid suspicion. They filled many rooms with dirt sacks in case a visitor came by. To keep the ground level, they poured soil into the house's backyard. He claims that the earth they dumped raised the backyard by 1 meter. Except for a slight bend to avoid a sewer pipe, the subterranean tunnel was almost perfectly straight. After that, the tunnel went beneath the central bank. Workers used advanced machinery in the central bank vault. The vault housed a large crane. The orange equipment is the crane. They use it to transport enormous vault money chests. The crane is supported by gray columns, which serve as pillars. Most vault workers spend the entire day moving money boxes, or cages, with the crane. They needed a crane to transport these cartons because they weighed more than half a ton. The crane did not have a specific location to return to at the end of the job, so they left it there. On Friday, before the bank employees left for the weekend, the crane came to a halt at the tunnel outlets where the burglars would emerge. The fourth column obscured the surveillance camera's angle. Investigators grew suspicious. Strange coincidence. They suspected that a bank employee was working with the criminals. They planned from the start to position the crane exactly where it would block the camera's view. Because it lacks a designated location, the crane remains at the same location after each shift. On Friday, before the bank employees left for the weekend, the crane came to a halt at the tunnel outlet where the burglars would emerge. The crane obscured the surveillance camera's view. Investigators suspected a bank employee was working with the robbers. They always intended to position the crane to block the tunnel opening from the camera. Camera at tunnel entrance. The lift design also aided robbers. Grey metal lift bars were installed along the wall. The wall did not fully support the nearby boxes, leaving a gap. Robbers used this small crevice as a passageway, despite the fact that the passageway was 60 centimeters long. The criminals who entered the vault and bank were thin due to the tunnel hole's small size. They avoided security cameras by walking through the tunnel between the money boxes and the wall. The movement missed them. The vault contained only 6 surveillance cameras. The vault was intended to be covered, but there were some gaps, particularly between the boxes and the wall. Thieves exploited this security flaw. In addition to the faultless in front of the hole, the robbers set up a cart with a wooden board to hide the hole from the camera. Thermal sensors within the vault complemented the cameras. These sensors would alert you if they detected someone. They saw only 6 cameras were installed to monitor the basement. Despite covering the entire area, there were some gaps, particularly between the boxes and the wall. Thieves exploited this security flaw. The burglars also mounted a cart with a wooden board on the forklift in front of the hole to obscure the camera's view. In addition to cameras, the basement contains heat sensors for security. When these sensors detect movement, they issue a warning. goes to the vault. How did the robbers avoid these sensors? First, the vault sensors were positioned incorrectly. Installation on the side walls is ideal, but the central bank vault sensors were mounted on the ceiling, which was high. The robbers were aware that the vault had multiple sensor blind spots. They possessed confidential vault information that should only be known by guards and bank personnel. Investigators suggested a theft night scenario here. The robbers may have accessed the vault on Friday. They saw only 6 cameras were installed to monitor the basement. Despite covering the entire area, there were some gaps, particularly between the boxes and the wall. Thieves exploited this security flaw. The burglars also mounted a cart with a wooden board on the forklift in front of the hole to obscure the camera's view. In addition to cameras, the basement contains heat sensors for security. When these sensors detect movement, they issue a warning, goes to the vault. How did the robbers avoid these sensors? First, the vault sensors were positioned incorrectly. Installation on the side walls is ideal, but the central bank vault sensors were mounted on the ceiling, which was high. The robbers were aware that the vault had multiple sensor blind spots. They possessed confidential vault information that should only be known by guards and bank personnel. Investigators suggested a theft night scenario here. The robbers may have accessed the vault on Friday. Employees would lock the vault and leave between 6 and 7 p.m., the final hour of work. Because the workday is still ongoing, the vault's alarms only sound after 7 p.m. Investigators believe the robbers entered the vault between 6 and 7 p.m., the final hour of work. At this point, personnel would have locked the vault but not triggered the alarms. At this point, the burglars arranged the vault however they pleased. They first obscured the cameras. After covering the camera hole, they examined the corridors and passages they would pass through between the cameras and thermal sensors blind spots, as well as between the money boxes and the vault walls. The detectives were certain that a bank employee or guard was assisting them due to their precise vault knowledge, but they were unable to identify a suspect among the criminals. They started begging money after entering the vault on the night of the robbery. Since the break-in occurred on Friday night, they had the entire weekend to steal from the vault without being detected, so they kept. The bags were placed on plastic carts and roped off as they escaped through the tunnel. Each bag contained 500,000 reals, so they needed 330 pounds to steal 164 million. That is huge. One thief exclaimed excitedly, "Let's break the world record." In 2003, Belgium's diamond robbery set the record for the largest theft. We may tell the story in another video. The heist netted $100 million in diamonds. This individual said, "Break that record. We have the money, just take it." Another added, "Don't be greedy, pal. We surpassed our goal." They stole 164 million reals, quadrupling their target of 80 million. It would take more than 200 million reals and be extremely heavy to make it the greatest robbery in history. At 3.5 tons, the weight was absurd. Moving it would be complicated. The theft prompted a quick police investigation. The residents and the gang's business, Grass Company, were investigated first. They're already heavy, and I'm worried we'll be unable to carry them later. They exceeded their goal because the others agreed with him. They stole 164 million reals, which exceeded their target of 80 million. To make it the greatest theft ever, they would need over 200 million reals and a large sum of money. At 3.5 tons, the weight was absurd. Therefore, moving and transporting it would be challenging. The robbery prompted a quick police investigation. The group's house and artificial grass business were investigated first. The artificial grass company and discovered that Paulo Sergio possessed their work authorization. His ID photo showed him wearing a woolen hat, which seemed odd. This formal paperwork should not allow a photo like that, so the woolen hat made him difficult to identify. The Ministry of Commerce accepted such a photo, surprising the police. How did they persuade them? Was there a bribery? The neighbors told the detectives that Paulo, the company's owner, was a pleasant individual who would come and go, sit in cafes, and converse with them. He had strong ties with everyone in the neighborhood, so everyone liked him. They liked him, which helped the gang avoid suspicion in the community. After investigating the company, the police looked into car and truck dealerships because they knew the thieves would need multiple vehicles to transport 3.5 tons of money. After reviewing the sales transactions, investigators discovered that a vehicle dealership had sold a few trucks for cash worth approximately 1 million Brazilian reais. Their investigation revealed that Jose Charles purchased these trucks. As a shipping company owner, he naturally purchases trucks. The odd thing is that he paid with cash. Bank transfers are typical for large transactions. Detectives reopened their investigation into Charles and his shipping company after learning about this unusual transaction. When they called the firm, the secretary surprised them by stating that Charles, the owner, traveled with the truck driver last Sunday. She reported an urgent need to transport cargo to São Paulo. When detectives heard São Paulo, they immediately connected the transit operation to the central bank robbery. They believed that most thieves were from São Paulo. Why would detectives suspect burglars from São Paulo despite being 3,000 miles away from the central bank in Fortaleza? A significant heist occurred in 2004 in São Paulo, as previously mentioned. The criminals robbed the bank by digging a tunnel underneath. Investigators suspect the São Paulo bank heist perpetrators were linked to the central bank robbery. The two gangs undoubtedly share members. When the authorities discovered Charles, the shipping business owner, accompanied the truck driver to São Paulo, they suspected he was transporting the stolen money. Why would the shipping business owner travel with the driver? That was odd. The cops found the vehicle transport truck after their investigations. Cars were transported from Fortaleza, where the central bank is situated, to São Paulo. This excursion took many days because the distance was almost 3,000 miles. After a few days, the federal police discovered the vehicle was in Belo Horizonte, a city between Fortaleza and São Paulo. Federal police personnel flew to this city via helicopter. The local police called the commander to report that the vehicle had stopped at a highway police station as they landed at the airfield. The vehicle stopped alone at the police station before the officers could intercept it. This happened because the truck driver was clueless and not participating in the process. However, his supervisor called over the weekend, surprising him, because Charles remarked, "Because we have an important shipment of cars that needs to be transported quickly." The driver cut his weekend break to convey the shipment. He wondered why moving automobiles was important from the start. He was even more confused that Charles wanted to come. The driver and firm owner traveled together for the first time. As time went on, strange events occurred. Charles kept requesting them to stop at stations and using public phones to call. The driver noted, the driver wondered. Why doesn't he use his personal phone? Why is he using public phones? Thus, Charles called when they stopped at one of these stations. Charles called from these places, so the driver stepped out to check at the cars behind the truck. He saw bundles of money on the car floor through the windows, even though the cars were locked. He was shocked and wondered, could these cars be filled with money? He linked it to the bank theft because of all the media coverage. Driver stopped at first police station on road to report the problem. A police notice was issued after a tip regarding the vehicle. Armed men quickly welcomed him. Federal police then detained the driver and Charles for interrogation. They found 6 million reals in the cars, which was a lot, but not quite as much as the 164 million taken. Still, $6 million is respectable. After questioning Charles, they discovered Marco Rogero's brother, a suspected São Paulo drug trafficker, was implicated. During the inquiry, Charles was found to be supervising truck and transportation logistics rather than participating in the robbery. The federal police arrested and questioned the driver and Charles. They found 6 million reals in the automobiles, which is little compared to the stolen sum. Remember, they took 164 million reals, but 6 million is good. The investigation into Charles revealed that Marco Rogerio's brother, suspected of being a drug trafficker in São Paulo, was not personally engaged in the crime. He managed truck and transportation problems remotely as a partner. He did not enter the home, dig the tunnel, or loot the bank, only a distant collaborator. He stated most of the gang members collected their part and left, and he didn't know their identities. He just carried his brother's 6 million reals from the automobiles police find. He told the police everything throughout the Charles probe. He estimated 34 robbers carried out the operation, making it a significant group. He stated he only knew his brother's identity, not the others. Some of their faces were unfamiliar to him. His brother coordinated. From the home, guests excavated the tunnel and looted the bank. He couldn't identify most of the operation's participants because he was a remote collaborator. He was delivering his brother's portion, the 6 million reals the police found in the vehicles, after each gang member got their share and left. Charles gave the cops everything. He estimated that 34 robbers carried out the operation, a huge group. He stated he only knew his brother's identity, not the others. Some of their faces were unfamiliar to him. His brother coordinated, and the cops gave Charles images of numerous offenders they thought identified his brother's friends. Charles claimed to have seen several of these crooks. The cops received these gang member images and identities from Charles. 10 people were identified, including Charles, his brother Marco, Paulo the Sufi hat wearer, the property owner, who was clearly a fake name, and Mao, a well-known Fortaleza criminal with a history of major thefts. Previous Marco operations always included him. Previous operations suggest Yimao is a leader, according to authorities. Moises is another key figure. Imagine Moises escaping prison in 2001 after being convicted. He was at Carandiru prison, where a gang of prisoners staged a big escape, including 3 through a tunnel. Moises was a tunnel specialist. A few years after his jail breakout, he participated in a bank heist in São Paulo in 2004. I told you about a similar operation before. This operation was similar since Moises was involved. He was a member and coordinator of both operations. Moises organized the new central bank robbery crew. Most of the members were chosen and coordinated by him. Police would learn this later, but he was a primary suspect from the start. Police are now building a network of suspected offenders. What will they do next? Stay focused, because the following part is crazy. Police have a list of evidence donors and more. The next step? They won't immediately arrest him. That's incorrect. Since they want to collect as much of the stolen money as possible, they must watch them. Brazil's theft penalty is light, so if they catch a thief, he'll serve a few years in prison and then walk out clean, with his money waiting for him, and live his life as usual. The police want to catch the thieves and retrieve their money. Police followed a phone number. The burglar's abode was in disorder when the police raided it, with rubbish everywhere. After looking through the trash, an officer uncovered a phone recharge card. This was a great lead, since they could link the recharge card's number to the credited phone number. So, the cops called the telecoms operator and got this number and started listening to calls. One of the police intercepted calls will be played soon. After receiving the money, the robbers were scared to utilize it to avoid suspicion, as shown in this tape. Laughter, applause. After looking through the trash, an officer uncovered a phone recharge card. This was a great lead, since they could link the recharge card's number to the credited phone number. The cops called the telecoms firm and obtained this number, then listened to calls. One of the police intercepted calls will be played soon. After receiving the money, the robbers were scared to utilize it to avoid suspicion, as shown in this tape. Laughter, applause. Poor man wanted a bike, but was worried the cops would discover out. Antonio Edimar, whose number it was a crook. They knew his neighborhood, but not his residence. This is Boa Vista. A squad of federal police officers began searching for this individual. They intercepted another vital call during this time. This call was recorded. Era para num papelaria comprar mais ou menos kit. Antonio requested assistance in buying rubber bands in this call. Rubber bands tie money. Antonio requested a lot. The cops discovered bank money. They thought they would count, divide, and rubber band the money in equal bundles. Field officers tracked Antonio and found him at this residence. We discussed the red home there. The police monitored the home. Naturally, they used civilian clothes to avoid detection. The cops sat at a cafe across from Antonio's residence, pretending to sip coffee or tea, observing from afar. Then 2 guys left the home. The undercover officer spotted one man suspiciously glancing at them. They chose to disclose themselves since they thought they were detected. Their rifles were drawn and they ordered the 2 guys to lie down. Police then encircled, entered, and arrested everyone inside the home. The occupants, they found a lot of bank money in the residence, as predicted. A lot was packed against the wall, in bags and in luggage. Bags of money were found in a hole in the house. They found about 12 million reals in the residence, a large amount of the bank's money. It was obvious that several people had it. Naturally, the police detained everyone in the home, starting with Antonio, whom they were following. Antonio's employer, David, an old guy, was arrested for the heist. He distributed and recorded the money in a notepad. The cops arrested Antonio and David, most in the home. 3 more persons were detained in the residence, but they were disciples of the elderly man David, not bank robbers. The cops discovered more suspects while investigating with them. A team of cops and investigators handled each lead and suspect group. The case got complicated with numerous specifics surrounding their arrests, but he distributed the money to the heist participants and recorded it in a notepad. The cops arrested Antonio and David, most in the home. However, 3 additional house guests were detained. They were David's disciples, but not bank robbers. Police began finding fresh suspects during the inquiry. Officers and detectives followed each suspect's lead and cell. The case was intricate with numerous specifics concerning their arrests, but will focus on the more exciting activities. Let's focus on the more exciting operations. Some of them are wild, so remain tuned. Police apprehended Decimar, a gang member. This man admitted bribing a bank guard. Edelson, the guard, was his friend. They learned about the bank vault security mechanisms by bribing this guard. He provided them whatever they wanted, so they avoided the vault's security measures, including surveillance cameras and heat sensors. They knew about the lift, the small corridors between the wall and the money boxes, and all the other facts we mentioned before. The guard provided all the information we discussed at the beginning, so the robbers had an inside guy, as the cops suspected. Move on to another key suspect. When investigating, officers found Raimundo Loreno. How did they discover him? After a long narrative, they followed his calls with his lover. They intercepted his calls with his fiancée and found him even though he never used his own phone, always utilizing public phones. They believed Raimundo was a gang member. The group was monitored for some time. This followed months of bank robberies. Raymond visited Porto Alegre, a beach city. After arriving at the airport, cops followed him. Raymond and his friend Alessandro, known as the Fat Man, drove to this property from the airport. Naturally, federal police monitored the residence behind them. 3 males came shortly after and entered the residence. Time passed and more guests entered the home. They entered the home. Small groups of 1, 2, or 3 would arrive. 11 persons came at different periods in the residence, according to the authorities. They knew these folks were preparing something. The cops followed the overweight Alessandro out of the house and saw him go to a bus stop where a group was waiting. They entered the blue pickup truck in front of you, which was likewise full with things. This building is where Alessandro dropped off the group in the city center. It is visible. They unloaded their items outside. Police found that the organization acquired the entire building. The building was registered to Fabrizio, who paid 1.5 million reals. What do such robbers and thieves want to accomplish in an old decaying building? Why are they bringing their stuff in? Are they remodeling? Of course not. The cops noticed they were excavating a new tunnel instantly. They observed a massive bank called Bani Rasul beside the structure after a cursory check. Big subterranean vaults at this bank. This was the robbers' new objective. Look at the criminals building and the bank building nearby. The new group is not the same as the one who robbed the central bank, although they share members. The cops found this new group after pursuing these individuals. In gangs, experts in fields like bank robbery and tunnel digging regularly switch groups and work with new members. The cops need to watch them since they don't have proof they were doing this inside the building. And here we have come to the end of the first part of the most insane story, talking about the biggest bank robbery in the history of Brazil. Wait for me in the second part, where I will complete to you how the police were able to decipher this complex gang and was able to arrest all the gang members in a way full of challenge and distinctive plots.